There we go. Okay. All right, so we started this tshuva yesterday. Yeah. We started this tshuva yesterday. A person hired a shochet. The shochet did not do a good job. The sheep that was supposed to be slaughtered for the family festival now is no longer usable. And we learned, he started telling us that there's a Gemara in Bava Kama that says that if a person is an expert shochet, he says, "Lachein pashut shimhu lo mumcha b'shchita, chayev bein imshachat bechinam bein b'schar." That he's a mazik if he ends up shechting and he's not an expert, because he had no business getting involved. So by volunteering to shecht your animal when he has no idea what he's doing, it doesn't matter whether there was pshia, there was not pshia, it was totally onus, he's a mazik. But if he's a shoichet who slaughtered at least 3 times, so he has some level of proficiency, so he wasn't negligent, but something happened. The cows, the sheep jerked at the last second. And so therefore, if he shechted and did it as a favor, he would not have to compensate the family. Because basically the fact that he has an expertise and was not successful could be the fault of the owner who just happened to have bad mazel. But if he was being compensated for his service, which means that he's a shomer sachar, so he's obligated even for aveda, even for loss that was beyond his control. So he just really is quoting in the footnotes the sources for this. Because of B'sifrei Imrei Bina Shal Kol Panim Chayv B'dinei Shamayim Kevin Shuhu Garam Lo Hezek, and the Sefer Imrei Bina says that the shochet should feel at least a sense of heavenly liability, because after all, he's caused some level of damage, even though he was not negligent in that sense, but still he was a party to them losing. Probably, how much does a sheep cost? I don't know what a sheep goes for. And what do anyone know what a?
I haven't bought one lately.
Depends if you're back then. Price per kilo is quite different.
Yeah.
Lamb.
Can you get kosher mutton in New Zealand?
Yeah, you can, but it's come from Australia.
Oh,
They don't kill 4-legged animals. They didn't really.
okay.
More sheep from people.
Well, they say that numbers to it. So.
There's
definitely more sheep than people.
Okay. V'lo gara mikol grama b'nezikin shafal pi shaparta medinei adam chayiv b'dinei shamayim. And it's no different from any other kind of causative damage. So that even though we can say that you're going to be a pater midinei adam, exempt in the Beis Din over here, but there may be some liability in the heavenly Beis Din because you had some causative damage involved. Imrei Bina Shamdan, he quotes in the footnote, in what case was the Imrei Bina discussing? He says that the Gemara in Bava Kama says that there was once a shochet who slaughtered an animal, ba'ofen shahya safek nevela, that it was a safek whether the animal was shechted properly or not. The Rav Heitrifo misafek begam poter es hashochet milashalim. Rav said, well, we're not sure whether this is a good shechita or not, so no one should eat it, but the shochet is exempt. Because of Imrei Bina, delo yehi elagrama b'nezikin v'lachayev lotzeis v'lachein chayev lotzeis l'dei shamayim. So the Imrei Bina writes that the shochet should feel some level of liability, at least from a heavenly perspective. V'shuv chilek dekevin tohir rak safek nevela v'yitachin deklapi shmaya galia da'ashchita kshera. But then he went ahead and said that in that particular case, where it was only a suffix where the animal was kosher or not, it could be that from a heavenly perspective, the animal is kosher. Nimsa shelo asa shum nezek, and perhaps he didn't do any damage at all. And therefore he wrote that in that situation where it's questionable if even he caused damage, then he's exempt even from a heavenly perspective. But what we can infer from that discussion is that if the shochet for sure made a mistake and really messed up, the shochet has liability, at least from a heavenly court. Mashma de Potter Legamri. However, there is another tshuva from the 19th century from Mahari Assad, who writes that no, the fact that this is not discussed in the poskim, that a shochet should feel a sense of liability, is okay. We'll have to study that a little bit later, but he says that you're not chayv even b'dinei shemayim. And the truth of the matter is that if we would hold a person liable, at least b'dinei shemayim, it might cause people to want to stop shechting. We have to also consider the consequences to the marketplace. If we hold people liable for things that just happen. Anyway, so
regular shech house now. What happens if it messes up a cow or?
It's a great question. What do you do when a shochet, a lot of times, maybe up to 50-60% of the animals are not usable, not because it's the fault of the shochet, but because internally the animal has some disease that renders it not usable. But what if the shochet is the one who made the error?
Is it that high percentage? It doesn't.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
It's the lungs. Doesn't it check the lungs?
It's the lungs and other major organs. Yeah.
Remember, getting back to that thing about the marketplace, why would it be any different for like a doctor, especially a doctor in the United States, who get always sued for malpractice or whatever else? I mean, it's the same situation.
Right. So.
No practice
insurance. I think one answer could be, I don't know what shochem get paid, but I don't know if their salaries are as high as surgeons. Maybe they are. I don't know. I really don't know. Anyway, v'hinei hiksha hashilte giborim degam kesheshochat bechinam. So the shilte giborim asks the question that even if a shochet slaughters for free, lama lo yechashev sheshochat b'schar kevin shashochet yachol levarech v'habracha shava asar zehuvim kideisa b'chulim. But 1 second, every time you shecht, you make a bracha, and that's a zuchus to make a bracha. Making a bracha is worth 10 gold pieces, the Gemara says. So isn't he getting compensated because you've given him the opportunity to make a bracha? The tirates, and by the way, there's a lot of discussion in this in the poskim as far as bris milah, that really it sounds like being chosen as the moil is a privilege. If anything, the moil should pay the family instead of the family paying the moil for the opportunity to do this incredible mitzvah.
Any idea how they darshan that it's worth 10 gold coins or whatever?
You'd have to take a look at the Gemara. I don't know how.
Which Gemara that is?
Chulin Pei Zayin Amud Aleph.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. So v'tireitz ha'pilpula charifta, the kevin shenisnavla b'shchita, nimsa shahaisa birkasa levatala umemela in lo schar bracha. So the Pilpula Charifta answers in a very interesting way. He says if he messed up the shchita, then he didn't do the mitzvah. And if he didn't do the mitzvah, then the bracha that he made on the mitzvah was not a valid bracha. And therefore he hasn't benefited at all, because you only get the zuchus of making a bracha properly if right afterwards you do the mitzvah. V'haktzos hachoshen tiritz tekivin dekaimul and mitzvahs lav lehanos nitnu zelo nechshav schar la'asoso k'shochet b'schar. The Ktzos hachoshen gives a different answer. He says we're not supposed to benefit. God did not give us the mitzvahs for personal benefit. He gave us the mitzvahs to serve Hashem. So even if a person feels gratified by being able to do something, that's not called being compensated, and therefore he's not a shomer sachar, and therefore he's going to be off the hook. The chol zeh, which is interesting. He says now we know that there's this concept of whenever you're watching over an aveda, whenever you're watching over a lost item, are you a shomer chinam or are you a shomer sachar? I found an animal, I keep it in my house. Am I a shomer chinam or a shomer sachar? So the Gemara says that you're a shomer sachar because you're benefiting in that if someone would come to the door asking for tzedakah, you would be exempt because you're already engaged in another mitzvah. Do you remember we learned that in the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda? So you're in some way getting benefit in that you can exempt yourself from other halachic responsibilities. And so the Ktzos HaChoshen brings a proof to this. He says, the Harav Yosef Svirale, the Shomer Aveda Havi Shomer Sachar, Kevin Deniskar Behahi Hana Delaboi Lamesav Rifta La'anya. The proof is that Rav Yosef in the Gemara holds that when you're watching over a lost object, you're like a shomer sachar, because you're getting the benefit that if a poor person were to come along, you're not obligated to drop everything and give him a piece of bread. Why not say that he's benefiting from doing a mitzvah? And anytime I'm doing a mitzvah, I'm getting benefit. Elavadai de mitzvahs lav lehanos nitnu ad kan devarav. And therefore, you must conclude that the performance of the mitzvah itself is not considered you being compensated, because Hashem didn't give us the mitzvahs for our own benefit. The kivein bazel l'mashakasav hashita mikubetzes bava metzia, and therefore this is consistent with a lot of other poskim. Okay, in any event, so that would explain why you're not a shomer chinam. If you're a shoichet that's a mumche and you slaughter for free. But he says, V'chol zeh she'uman chayiv k'sheshochat bischar, hainu davke im hakeves niya nevela biglal shehu lo shochat tov. The fact that you're going to be liable for damages if you shechted and it turns out to be not kosher because they were compensating you is only when the reason why the animal is not kosher is because you made a mistake with the shechita. Aval imhu shachat ve'achar hashchita badak es hasakin v'ra'a sheyesh ba pigima. But if you shechted properly, but then after you checked the knife post facto, because they check the knife both before and after the shechita, and if there's a pigima, if there's a nick on the knife,
Why after?
because maybe on my way into the cut, the animal had some kind of rough spot on its hide or on its fleece that nicked the knife. And so it could be that even though it was perfectly smooth before I did the shechita, maybe on the way into doing the shechita, the knife became damaged, and that would render the animal an avela. He says, he says, in that situation, the animal is a suffik nevela, and you're not allowed to eat it. Because our fear is that maybe the knife got nicked on the skin, on the hide of the animal, before you severed its trachea and esophagus. Mikol makom efshar l'chayev es hashochet sheyishalem ki yitochen shehasakin nifkama be'etzem hamafreket la'achar shchita tasimanim. But still in that situation, you can't hold the shochet liable because maybe the knife was nicked after the animal was properly shechted on the one of the vertebrae. So in other words, maybe you did cut through the trachea and the esophagus, and then you nicked the knife on a bone that was right there. It says uva emes hakeves kasher, and maybe the sheep is kosher.
The nick came after.
Because the nick came after you severed the trachea and the esophagus.
That's first.
Right, right. Yeah.
The suffix or is it, can you eat the animal or?
No, you're not allowed to eat the animal. They check the knife before and after the shechita. If a nick is found even in the knife, even after the shechita, you cannot eat the animal because it's a suffix. Lachein hamotzi mechavero olav haraya ve'ein l'chayev es hashochet. And therefore, the burden of proof is on the person who is out of a sheep. And you can't make the shochet liable because you don't know whether it's kosher or not. V'gam zeh dafka im barakas hasakin lifnei hashchita umatza osalolo pegima. And furthermore, that's only true if before the shechita the knife was properly checked and didn't have any nicks. Aval im ulo barakas hasakin lifnei hashchita harehu posheya. But if the knife was not checked before the shechita and it was only checked after the shechita, that's negligence. And then you'd have to pay even if you slaughtered for free, because that's an act of negligence. But in any event, the shochet is not compensated for the shechita because it wasn't a valid shechita. Now, why is that? So he writes, Kain mashma mishuta rashba shehuva bebeis Yosef shekasav, umius charo hifsid de dilma besakin paguma kashachid adkan lashona. He says the Beis Yosef writes, quoting the Rashba, that he doesn't get compensated for his shechita because he can't prove, the shochet can't prove that he did a proper shechita. Maybe the knife had a pegima on it, a nick on it, before the shechita was done. Umavur sham berashba de kamosha shochet pater l'shalim ala behema afal pisha sa safek nevela du ulai hu beemes he beemes kashera. He says just like a shochet is exempt from paying for the animal when it's a suffix, whether it's nevela or not, because maybe the animal is really kosher. Hu hadin de pater milashalim lo scharo du ulai behema beemes nevela. Similarly, he's exempt. You don't have to pay him his wages because maybe he made the animal in a vela and he didn't do the job he was hired to do. So it sounds like the only time you'd have to pay a shochet for his services is if he did a perfectly good shechita. If then afterwards you check the animal and discover that it has holes in its lungs, so the animal is not kosher for no reason having to do with any kind of failure of service of the shochet, and therefore you would have to whatchamacallit, you'd have to pay him for his services. Yeah. So this is very revealing. When a shochet does not do the shechita properly, you don't pay him. When he doesn't do the shechita properly because of negligence, so then he has to pay. If there was no negligence involved, then it depends. If he's a novice, then he has to pay. But because he just doesn't know what he's doing. But if he's an expert, he's already proven himself. He has experience. And all you need is 3 times, apparently, which is not.
I don't want to be the first 3.
Yeah. That's what they said, to the moil,
There's another one, the moil cuts off too much, or issues like that too. What happens then?
It's very hard to cut off too much. I mean, the only thing that could happen is if the moil nicks the glands, the head of the penis. And that actually has happened.
It happened.
Really?
Yeah.
Happened to a friend of mine, a colleague of mine who we trained together as moiling. And he used a certain kind of clamp that has been involved in a lot of lawsuits because the particular clamp, it's if you don't know exactly what you're doing, then you could get the head of the penis trapped in the clamp. And that's exactly what happened. And yeah,
A little bit too much.
well, he cut off the head of the penis. Yeah. They had to reattach it surgically, and I don't know what the outcome was, but I just know that he's not a moil anymore. Yeah. Which, you know, the way I do it, I don't think it could ever possibly happen because I don't use that clamp. That's the reason why
Why
I
would you
never
use
use
it if there's a hobby that's
the reason for using it is because you end up, when it's done correctly, you end up with a really good finished product. There's very little bleeding. The healing is a little bit faster. So a lot of
This is the clamp you put on before you cut it, not after.
correct.
It's not the Bronstein, it's not what.
It is the Bronstein.
That's after the fact.
No, it's not.
That clamp goes on to stop the bleeding, right?
No.
That kind of amount of oil.
It goes on before you
It
slice.
goes on before you slice.
Yeah.
Slice.
Remember,
Sounds like a
you gotta do it 3 times. before you
Times
treat
first,
it.
But I do remember my first one.
I'm sure.
And
Are you schwitzing?
I was schwitzing.
I
I was a mess. I was a total mess.
drinking.
Oops, When did you do for me?
It was on a Rosh Hashanah. I did the bris. Yeah.
The person must have been very brave.
They were very brave. I mean, the truth is, it wasn't my actual first circumcision because I had practiced on Arab babies in Shari Tzedek Hospital.
Did you make mistakes then too? I hope.
I should have. Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
So what's really the chiddush here? If there's posheya, he has to pay. What's the chiddush here?
Well,
The fact that he wasn't a mumka, that's that one catch that if he did it, he's not a mumka. Like,
yeah,
what is-
I guess
Obviously, anything that someone is negligent, they have to pay.
Right.
Does he pay for another animal? Or does he just?
Pay for the loss or the
or
difference
does-
between
or does
selling
he-
it as an avela versus,
or
because it's still worth money.
right.
Well,
It
yeah,
still
but
it still is worth
it's-
money. You
Sell
can
it to
The man,
Loblaws or
the
something.
person who wanted the sheep for his event is now out of.
Okay, that's something else. So, you know,
So how does that do?
I don't know that you can hold him liable for compensating you for the pain and suffering of not having food at the event.
party.
They'll have to run.
The apple's not gonna be in the mouth.
Yeah, they'll have to run to the makolet and buy some steaks.
Buy something else for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Let me. I did photocopy the next packet. So let me just bring that up. And I'll send it out to you also. Let's see here. My computer is schlepping along here. Okay.
It's actually price my shop.
Rabbi, one thing we just touched on, which is not really the Shomer Chinam, who basically, the Shomer Sachar, I always thought that there had to be some kind of deal going on, and between, you know, the person who's watching, the person who's giving it to be watched. And there's an implication in the Gemara that you can passively become a Shomer Sachar.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And so that passive shmira of sachar kind of lets you off on other spots. Was that one of the conclusions of that?
When you're watching a lost object, which requires your attention, like if it's just passive watching, so then you're not going to be exempt.
If
But-
you find a piece of jewelry and put it in a cupboard, that's not what we're talking about.
That's-
We're talking
Right.
about-
Passive,
yeah,
Right.
we're talking
Let's
about-
say you're taking care of an animal. You found a donkey
Right.
in the road, right?
So if somebody comes knock on your door and you must be, the donkey's giving you trouble, then you can say, excuse me,
I'm busy.
I'm thinking I'm gonna say,
Oh, yeah.
but if the donkey's in the backyard, you have to even think about it, you still gotta give the animal money.
Right. But you're still getting compensated in the sense that during that time when you are taking care of the donkey, then you have the peace of mind knowing that you're not going to have to deal with anyone else.
Kind of a weird, getting off the hook type of phenomenon.
Fun straight kids.
It is. It is an unusual kind of, yeah.
So
Okay.
could you say that when these people are walking around during davening, in the middle of the midst of doing something, and therefore
I think that's a common mistake that people make, is that they feel obligated to give a person money while they're davening. But in reality, if you're davening, you're not really supposed to interrupt your davening for anything, even to stick your hands in your pocket. So you really should wait until after davening. But it depends at which stage of davening you're at. Once you finish Shmona Esrei, then the poskim do allow for a person to give money to a poor person. But it's when you're in really from Baruch Hu until after the Amida, you have to really focus on your tefillah to the exclusion of everyone else.
Wouldn't it be best to do it before davening even starts?
What? Yeah, I mean, if he's there, give it to him before davening. But what if the Mishulach comes into the minyan
We have it all the time. They come around.
in the middle? Yeah, so that's why we have a very strict policy that we don't allow people to come in during davening. We're a little bit more lenient if they come in towards the very end and they start walking. We don't make a fuss, because there's nothing wrong with that. Halachically, if you, while you're saying uvalit Zion, you can dig into your pocket or
So that when you do much Shmona Esrei, you talk about the repetition as well as your own personal Shmona Esrei, or not?
It's questionable. There's a machlokas as far as how attentive you have to be. According to the Mechaber, you have to be standing at attention while during Chazaras Hashatz. So if giving him tzedakah is going to distract you from answering Baruch Hu Baruch Shema and Amen, so then you shouldn't really interrupt that. But the question is, how makbid are people during Chazaras Hashatz? If you're looking at your phone during Chazaras Hashatz, then you should also give the guy tzedakah. Oh no, I can't give you. I'm busy checking my stocks. Yeah.
I just lost money on the stocks. I can't afford it. It's catching up on the news.
Okay. All right.
Well, just out of curiosity from about the knife. Today with our technology and everything like that, is there much less of a chance than from, let's say, 100 years ago of the knife getting those nicks because these knives are made much better? And
it's a really good question. I don't know the answer. I would imagine that it depends on the quality of the metal and how it's been manufactured. Some knives are much more susceptible to nicks than others. Yeah, so probably more recent technology, but I don't have any personal experience with shchita knives. Yeah, several times I've been to the
So how can
shmachtas.
they mess up like on a cow jumping before you actually
It's very hard to mess up today because they use a hydraulic system, a machine that locks they basically prod the animal to go into a very confined area. It sticks its neck out, it's forced to stick its neck out. Then it's in this hydraulic lift, which goes and it lifts up its neck. And so the animal's head is really stationary and it's not moving. But that doesn't necessarily mean that when you're shechting a sheep, let's say on the moshav, you're not gonna have that hydraulic process.
But also the sharpness of the knife is probably, the blade is so fine.
Okay, we'll have to hold it here.
What's the bracha?